Thank everyone for coming up. This is our November 3rd Library Building Committee. I guess we don't have to do the roll call. Nancy has that, so I'll just, first of all, before we get into the old business of approving the minutes, I just want to thank everyone for the wonderful effort with the referendum. As everyone knows, hopefully everyone knows that the referendum passed unanimously, or excuse me, overwhelmingly yesterday. We had 2,716 yes votes versus 549 no votes, which was like 83%. There were 3,265 votes that were cast, and we were required to get a majority plus 15%, which would have been 1,876. And we got 2,716. Almost 850 votes over what was required. So it was a huge effort, a great time for the building committee, for the town of Bloomfield, and just wanted to thank everyone on the call for all of your work and effort in making that happen. Elizabeth and her team, Maxine and the volunteers over the weekend. It was just tremendous to see the canvassing and all the excitement at the polls yesterday for people walking by, giving us a thumbs up for the library proposal. So it's just a tremendous feat. We're very excited. I just wanted to open the floor to anyone who has anything to comment on the referendum. Mr. Berman.
In the past, so overwhelmingly surprised me. I didn't think it was going to be that overwhelmingly successful. And I also want to say thank you for chairing, Greg. We will miss you on the committee because I know this is the last meeting you will get to be at as chair.
Thank you. Richard, I know you had your hand up. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to congratulate you and the members of the committee and the library staff, town officials as well. This is an extraordinary turnout that you have reported. We've had a number of recent referenda in the past couple of years, and this one by far, I would like to tell you, is overwhelmingly convincing. Others are typically much closer. So kudos to you and everyone who participated.
All right, thank you. Okay.
Greg?
Yes, Mark.
I want to let you know that I did ask Elizabeth to reach out to the burgers and let them know about the successful results as well. And I would also like to add to the thank yous specifically to Maxine in charge of the outreach committee. This is your good work, so thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Leah, no, Elizabeth, I see your hand up. Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to say that, you know, as a parent in Bloomfield, I am so excited for the future for my children. You know, they were a little bit confused about the library vote because I told them, you know, we're going to vote for libraries and we're going to make the world a better place. And so my sons thought it meant it was 2 votes and that there was a vote on there to make the world a better place. And I explained how libraries make the world a better place. So I just really want to say thank you to the building committee, to the library board, specifically Maxine, Leah, and Ava, to Greg for his leadership, and to everybody. It truly takes a village. And I remember Mark telling me it's a miracle to get libraries built more than a year ago. And I believe you, Mark. It is truly a miracle. And thank you to everybody for all of your effort and dedication to serving the town of Bloomfield and all of our residents.
Yeah.
Echo that.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So why don't we get onto the agenda, and I'd like to entertain.
Dave has his hand up.
Oh, I didn't say. I'm sorry, Dave.
It's okay.
Yeah, no worries. I was just going to echo Richard's comments. Congratulations to you guys. You worked really hard at this, and it's a great result. So congratulations.
Thank you. Okay. Maxine?
Yeah, I would also like to just thank everyone for your tireless work. As a subcommittee, we worked really diligently and had multiple meetings over the last several weeks just to plan our marketing strategy. We've had social media blasts, display boards, messenger articles, and most recently Saturday and Sunday, the canvassing, and just the willingness to support the project. I'm so thankful to work with everyone. So I just wanted to give a huge shout out to the outreach committee, Downs, the friends, the time and effort that has been put forth in this is just amazing. So thank you to everyone that participated.
Okay, great. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from October 20?
So moved.
Thank you, Bob. Is there a second? Christine,
I'll
okay,
second
great.
with one change.
Okay, I was just gonna ask, any comments or input on the minutes?
There was just one change that Nancy, I think, already made, right?
Yes. And I sent it out. There was should have been Bill and I put Bull. A full, and it said Bull. So I fixed that in item number 7.
Okay, great.
One more change.
Yes,
Item 6, future meetings, there's a typo on the date there, Nancy. 11.
Yep, got it.
4, yeah, okay.
okay, great. Okay, all those in favor with the motion noted with the amendments, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you so much. Next, we'll go into new business and start with committee reports. I think the only report we may have is the external outreach, and I'll turn it over to Maxine.
Pretty much what I said before. Our last meeting was October 23rd, and we just met to finalize our plans for publicizing the library building project. And as I said before, we've had a lot of deliverables. So again, just thank you to everyone that participated in that effort.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from Maxine? No. Okay. Leah, do you have anything on the program space subcommittee?
Apologies, I am at work. No, no report.
Okay, great. Mark, anything?
No report, Mr. Chair.
All right, and then I'll turn it over to Elizabeth for her director's report.
Yes, we are looking forward to November 22nd. That is the date of the next Connecticut State Library Board meeting, where they will be making decisions about the grant applications. As a reminder to everybody, we are hoping for a $1 million grant award. I wanted to let everybody know that in the last month, we had 574 hits to the Library Building Committee page of our website. So a lot of people were out there trying to get information about the project. And I know that I've had people say thank you for our efforts to get information out. I also wanted to say thank you to the Friends for everything they did to spread awareness about the library building project and the referendum. So thank you to all the Friends for that. That's all. Thank you.
Any questions or comments for Elizabeth? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to get a project update, and I'll turn it over to Richard to see if he has anything.
Yes, thank you. Just very briefly, we have been communicating with Downs. They have forwarded their draft pre-construction schedule going forward that I have discussed with Scott Scholl from Downs. We would like to continue these discussions with Downs and with the committee to make sure that all of the milestones in the near future are identified. I will tell you, I think it's an ambitious schedule, and a lot of things need to fall into place, particularly with local reviews. We'll need to go to planning and zoning, and then there are a number of agencies that we need to touch base with. So anyway, this is a good start on the pre-construction schedule. We have a number of things that we need to flesh out a little bit more on that schedule.
All right, thank you. One question, Nancy, did we disseminate the report that was produced last week by TSKP to the committee?
Yes, it was
Okay,
sent
great.
to the building committee. It's also on the town's webpage.
All right, perfect.
Downs report was also on the town's webpage too.
Okay, perfect. Any questions or comments for Richard? Mark?
Yeah, regarding the schedule, just something to decide whether it needs to be in there or not is the Army Corps of Engineers with regard to Washbrook. I have no idea whether that comes into play or not, but it's a big item if it, a long-term, long lead item if we do need to go there. So just something to investigate.
If I could respond, Mr. Chair. Mark brings up a very good question. Typically, the Army Corps would be involved if you're disturbing a certain number of square feet. And so that needs to be carefully calculated, just how much disturbance will occur on the site or the wetlands areas. And so only when that calculation is done will we be able to know whether we exceed the threshold that will trigger the Army Corps review. And I think it's 5,000 square feet, but don't quote me on that because I'm doing this from memory. What ideally would happen is that the Army Corps would say, this doesn't fall within our jurisdiction or it falls below our threshold, so we don't need to do any review. But yes, that should be on the schedule, and we need to do that. But this gives me the opportunity to also tell the committee that you do need a proper A2T2 survey done of the site and some geotechnical exploration as well. So I'm not sure if that's going to be done through Nancy Haynes or how the owner will provide those services, but that is a critical ingredient in all of the approvals going forward. They want to see a proper A2T2 survey for both parcels, at McMahon as well as Prosser.
Great, thank you. Lois?
Sorry, we had a lot of discussion about architecture in the course of before the referendum. And we had said consistently that we would be revisiting the architecture as we go along, the final plans. And we also had said that there would be room for public comment. We did have the survey, but that really didn't deal with the architectural issue. And so I'm hoping that there's room in the schedule for having more public input and discussion of the architecture so that everybody kind of comes to an agreement about what it's going to be and feels that they've had input, whether they get what they want or not, that they feel that they've had input.
Okay. Thank you, Lois. Budanzi, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I'm interested in knowing when you reference the number of items that you need to flush out in this schedule, what are those items specifically, please and thank you. And then I have some other questions as well, or statements to make, but I'd like that question asked. That's for Richard.
Yes, thank you, Mackenzie.
Thank you.
Typically what we would need to do for any project is to have site plan reviews by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission would then refer the project to a number of agencies in town. That would be the building department, the fire marshal's office, the traffic department, the safety department, the architectural review commission or committee. So all of those agencies in town would have some say in the planning and zoning review. I'm sorry, Dunsey, I don't have the entire list in front of me, but it includes those that I mentioned and also wetlands. Wetlands would be also part of that review. So it's the local agencies that serve the needs of the Bloomfield community that will be part of that overall review. In addition, the planning and zoning will probably require us to reach out to state reviewers as well. Both parcels abut state roads. So in the case of Prosser, you have routes 178 and 189, both abutting the parcel. And at McMahon, you have Route 187. Those are state roads. So the Planning and Zoning Commission will want to get the state's DOT review of that. And anytime we touch a state road, we have to go through what's called an encroachment permit process, which has to be done before you can touch any of the state roads. And I believe that includes utilities, sidewalks, lighting, whatever abuts the state properties.
Okay,
Dan, do
thank
you have
you.
another question?
Actually, no, I'm pretty satisfied with his response to that, but I do want to make a statement, piggybacking what Lois said. The referendum has passed, and I think that it would be paramount to include more public discussions as it relates to the designs, that it should take place sooner than later. And I think that they should be continuous conversations. Maybe that's something the outreach committee can work on making happen. But yeah, I do think that that is needed and necessary. And I think that I don't know when you would be able to do that, because it sounds like some of the items in which Richard has stated and the coordination of scheduling as it relates to Downs and the town entities as well as the state entities being involved, where you would start that public discussion. But I do think it needs to take place sooner than later, so that they can be addressed prior to some of these other happenings, in particular prior to the project going before the design review committee.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Okay. Next, we have updates from Downs, unless there are any other questions. I'm sorry, for TSKP. I didn't see any other hands up. I'm going to turn it over
Elizabeth. Elizabeth has her hand up.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that the library has been doing outreach this entire time, alerting the public that they are invited to all meetings. The meetings are included on our public calendars and in our weekly email newsletter blasts. We also created a new document today that's available at both locations, letting people know that they're invited to come and share their opinions. It even says, "Let your voice be heard" at the bottom. And we're giving those out at both locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn, is it Tom? Tom, are you going to do the Downs report?
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Scott. Thanks, Greg. But before Scott starts, Diana Colcord logged on, and I think she wants to say a couple words. So if you don't mind to pass it to her real quick, and then Scott will give a quick report.
You're muted, Diana.
Thank you, Nancy. I just wanted to say good evening to all of you. I just wanted to say congratulations on your referendum passing. It was a pleasure working with the Communications Committee. And I just wanted to extend our services, post referendum services, in case you need any further communications outbound relative to websites or any kind of information that you want to share with the public. So we're here to support you in any way possible. So, but congratulations, you all did an amazing job. Elizabeth, you're number one.
Thank you. All right,
Thanks,
Scott?
Diana.
Okay. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. Everybody see it? All right. Yeah, we'll do a little celebrating, you know? Okay. So it's a great thing that this is passed, and we're very excited. Everybody's very excited. At some point, we will have a project financial summary to go through, and can't wait to talk about that. For schedule update, as TSKP had mentioned, we have a pre-construction schedule out there with some markups as we're looking to work with TSKP on some possible early bid packages, which is going to take some coordination and something that we have to still get together on and work through. estimating activities for each of the design phases noted above for any of the bid packages. That's something that's going to be coming up. Site logistics development. The town is reviewing the State Traffic Commission if the rotary on Route 189 at Prosser is still a project. Someone had mentioned that it wasn't anymore at the last committee. I don't remember who. I did reach out to District 1 and they got back to me this morning. I spoke to Doug Hunt, and a few things. He wasn't aware that the Rotary project was not happening, but he was going to look into it and just get back to me to see if that is the case. And he had given us approximately a 6-week review for plans. So it's something that we'll note in the schedule for now, and hopefully that's something that doesn't change. But we'll keep our thumb on that pulse. Other local and state approvals, as TSKP had mentioned, with planning and zoning and wetlands and deep Department of Energy and environmental protection, particularly for the Washbrook area, the Washbrook and the wetlands at Prosser. So these are all things that we have to start getting into with durations and what it's going to take. Lead, if the committee is going to go forward with a lead project, obviously that's pretty important for your state grant and making them aware if that's the direction you're going to take, and in going for a silver and actually getting the certificate, which appears to be a requirement if you choose to go through that. So another thing through design that will come to fruition on whether that's happening or not. And obviously our building permitting approvals. Important milestones, activities related to the grant process. Again, I just threw the lead certification in there if that is something that's going to happen. Later this month in the applications, it looks like the State Library Board takes actions on your applications, and then that goes to your bond commission approval. And once it's approved, we have the deadline for construction being 18 months after approval. So hopefully we're getting some news at the end of this month in regards to your grant and that moving all forward for Prosser. I believe next year you're going for McMahon, as we're going one at a time here for the grants. Bidding procedures, we've been getting into those requirements for the grant process to make sure we're up to snuff on what those requirements are and what the state library needs from us after bidding, with all the documentation and the logs and showing the bid logs with the 3 bidders for each items or more, obviously. Public outreach activities for bidding participation, which Tom has gone through in the past, and that's something we will be putting together along with the good neighbor meetings. Any questions on pre-construction schedule development? Okay.
Yeah, Scott, I have a question.
Yes.
Or just a comment, actually. Richard had mentioned the need for the survey and soils investigation early on. We're also going to need a hazmat investigations at both sites.
Correct.
Just to make sure we get that in there as well.
Yep, I will add those in there.
Bob Berman?
Yes, Scott. The town engineer is the one who told me that the DOT's decided to drop the roundabout issue because they discovered they would have to do 2 lanes going each way, and there was not enough right of way to do that.
Okay, I'll mention that when he gets back to me. Thank you.
Okay. Lois?
Tom, it strikes a real chord with me when someone says, if we are going forward with lead. I thought that was a determination, and we are in fact going forward with lead.
That is correct. That is my understanding as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's our understanding.
Okay.
Okay. Nancy, I see your hand up.
Yep, I just wanted to clarify or add on to Bob's comments about the roundabouts. I think the exact wording from the state was not that we are not going to do it. They said they needed to go back and look at things. I believe they said the traffic count was too high for what they had proposed, but they didn't say absolutely not, but that's really what they meant. Although, so that's probably the response you got, Scott, was based on the fact that they didn't outright say no, but what they're going to do when going back to the drawing board didn't leave much hope that the roundabouts were going to be a thing.
Okay, understood.
Okay, Fudanzi.
Thank you. What's the projected cost that we may incur if we don't get the grants, say for instance, from the state library or that of the leads? What would there be a cost difference based on how you've projected the project? As to
I don't think there's much cost difference with the leads, but with the grant, there's a certain amount of monies that you're going for,
$1
and
million.
yeah, exactly. And frankly, the design really has to come out with the design development drawings so that we can actually put a budget together based on the budget we already have to shore things up and see where we're going to be at.
So working in tandem with the architect, are you guys looking at the possibility, for instance, that we don't get it, how that will impact the design and the overall construction cost? Is that taken into consideration in terms of the variability?
Tom, you want to add in, because I
Can I
believe
take a stab at that,
yeah.
Chair?
Yeah. Go ahead, Mark.
We've moved forward with this project on the assumption that we will not be getting a grant. Our budget does not include the grant. If we get the grant, we're $1 million to the good.
Okay.
So that's basically how we've gone forward. And my understanding is the budget includes going forward with lead silver.
It does.
Right. And in fact, Mark, it's we've included $2 million, 2 separate $1 million grants for each of the buildings. One next year and hopefully one this year.
Right, but we haven't counted on those. We're not relying on
Correct.
those to move forward.
Correct.
Okay.
All right. Michelle.
You're muted.
I'm back on the leads issue. And the question that I have is, I don't recall that we ever had a formalized vote on voting for lead certification. Can anybody give the status of that, whether we voted on it or not? And then I'll have a follow-up.
I can answer that. It was included in the budget, and when we authorized applying for the grant, we knew it was a requirement of the grant. So it was embedded in that.
You didn't actually have a vote on the desirability of it. You're talking about having a requirement of the grant. So we don't have an opinion with regard to what benefit it will accrue to the town by having a lead certification. I ask the question because I think it's a very important question to ask. There's a lot of information out there about the cost benefit or the cost of lead certification and what it actually adds to a project, some to a very much greater degree than others. And I would suggest we would have at least some statements of what we're going to gain by having lead certification, whether we get the grant or not. So I would like to propose that we look into that and have a simple statement, nothing time intensive, but just so we understand what we're getting into. And since we didn't have a vote specifically on that, but is included as a requirement by others, I think we should address it. So I would like to move that we do that.
I second that.
I'm sorry, is that a motion or Michelle? You just
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'm
Yes.
sorry. All right, is there any discussion on that? Mark?
I do recall that in our budget discussions, we talked about the costs, the relative costs of construction and consultants involved. with LEED. I can't quote them now, but we did have those discussions. I really don't know, I think it's a process as we go through this, just like any other systems or things that we're going to be looking at as we move forward in the design. And to try and have a definitive yes, no about it, I think it's going to be really difficult based on any further information, other than the fact that we know we would like to be LEED silver, and we know that we have no shot at the $1 million grant if we don't. So, I'm afraid of taking any more formal action on this, in addition to what we've already done and what we're going to be doing as we go through this.
Lois?
My understanding from what everyone has told us as we've gone along through this is that the construction standards would automatically include LEED. And the piece that isn't necessarily automatic is the documentation that that's happened. And again, if we are going to leave $1 million on the table because we didn't get the documentation, I think that's inappropriate management of the town's finances.
Thank you. Bob Berman.
One of the things that you have to remember when you do LEED certification, whether it's silver or gold, you don't save any money in the construction phase. You save the money in the operating phase of it. That's where the savings comes in. That's where it becomes cost effective. So, and as Lois said, I'm not so sure that under today's building regulations and construction regulations and all, that LEED silver isn't automatically a large part of that. That there are lots of things that need silver certification that are automatic. In some stuff you do anymore. As an example, you don't use incandescent light bulbs anymore. Usually you go with LEDs or the equivalent. And those keep becoming more efficient as time goes on. They may cost you a little bit more money going forward, but that's what you do because they end up saving a tremendous amount on the operating end. So, I'm not sure it's relevant as to what the actual LEED cost is going to be, because a lot of the things that we're going to be doing and are going to be in there are ending up with LEEDs, the LEEDs or LEEDs equivalent certifications to begin with, because that's the products that are out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Budunzi.
Well, my concern with regards to LEEDs, and when we had the discussion with the consultant that came here, one of the questions that I asked him was that, can we garner energy from the existing solar farm that we have at the Board of Ed, and or that from Seabury? Can we garner that energy? We can't garner that energy. Well, doing more research with LEED, we can't retain energy even in the boxes that we have. Like if we were to have that LEED energy. And my concern, primarily based on what we've all seen as to what happened in Texas as a result of the cold freeze that they unexpectedly got, but we are accustomed to having the adverse impact that would have on maintenance, repairs, and the interruption of energy being provided to the two buildings. On top of that, it sounds like, we want to do LEEDs because that's required for this grant. Well, it's looking at if we don't have this grant too. At the end of the day, is it worth paying the money up front to really not save money over time? So those are my concerns. Thanks.
Michelle, your hand up.
Yes. What I wanted to say was I am not proposing or suggesting that we shouldn't do LEEDs, not in the least. I am proposing and saying that as a taxpayer, we should always know what things cost and what the benefit will be provided. And there has been a lot of outstanding information about understanding just what a LEED certification will deliver, not only in the current day, but over time. It's important to know that regardless of whose overall tab it is. And from the standpoint of knowing what those future costs might be, I look at LEEDs as a lot more than bragging rights of saying we are LEED certified or whatever our certification is. I think that it's important for us to know what we are getting, what we are buying, or what we are receiving under the responsibility of someone else's grant, and just exactly what that means. So my motion stands. I would like to bring it forward just for a vote.
Yeah. Okay, the question has been called. I'm looking through my notes, and I know on June 10th, Mark and I met with the Conservation, Energy, and Environmental Commission, and they too wanted to make sure that we were going to have a LEED Silver building. We talked about LEED, and also there was a resolution from that committee that urged us to make sure that we were being fully compliant with energy efficiency, state-of-the-art, geothermal, but I've got to go back to the minutes, but let's call the question. All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying, can we go back to the full screen? I can't see.
Yeah, Scott, could you stop sharing the screen?
Yeah, as long as we can come back and
You
finish.
can come back.
Yep.
Okay. All in favor of the motion proposed, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
No,
No. Christine, so I think we've got 8 people, 2 yeses and 6 nos.
Yes.
The motion does not carry.
Okay, I have just one very brief follow-up question, if I may. I think it's great that all town agencies have the opportunity to review such significant proposals, but the CEEC's resolution is their resolution. It's not ours.
It's advisory. Yes,
I just think it's very important to know that how we conduct business with regard to proposals before us matters. And that's all I would like to say.
thank you. All right, we'll go back to Scott so he can finish his presentation.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I lost the where to go. There we go. So for item C, items for discussion, our draft contract was submitted to the town of Bloomfield on October 28th last week for the town's review. Nancy, I believe it was sent to you.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wanted to note that that was out there. And then action items, again, we'll just keep at the end for when they come to fruition. And that's all I had. Thank you.
Scott, you currently don't have anything for us to approve as far as
No.
invoice. Okay, good. Okay. Any additional questions for Scott on the presentation and update? Okay, thank you so much, Scott. Nancy, do we have anything under invoice approvals?
Yes, we have 2. We have an additional invoice from Fast Signs for $500.01 for some additional foam board signs, the ones you saw in the various town buildings. And it is invoice number 21919646.
Okay.
I'll move approval of invoice number 2191-9646. I have a couple questions.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mark. Any discussion on the motion to approve?
Yes, please and thank you.
Go ahead, who does?
When was it determined, because there have been a few meetings that I've missed, where was it determined that we would pay pay for those as a committee? Can you give me the meeting to where that was a part of the discussion to pay for that?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. It was either
That's
the last,
fine.
yeah, I don't have the
Is it
information.
possible? Is it possible if, once it becomes available to you, you can make it available to me?
Yes.
Please and thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions on the invoice?
Yes.
Okay, good. But
Nancy, do we know, looks to me like we now are talking 15 signs altogether.
Yes.
Know where the others were placed? I know where the first ones were placed. I don't remember seeing any additional ones.
I'm going to ask maybe Elizabeth if you remember where the other ones were placed.
yeah, okay. Go ahead, Elizabeth, if you want.
Yes, they were placed around town in areas with higher populations. I know that 330 Park Town Hall, both libraries, Heirloom Flats, Amna's Restaurant, Fresh Market,
Village Pizza.
Village Pizza.
Was there one at Doncaster or Seabury?
One at Doncaster, one at Seabury, yes.
Those I remember.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, Christine?
Not about the invoice, but are we
Oh.
going to keep those signs in place? Or are we gonna take them down or remove them from the site? We're gonna keep them in place throughout the project?
That's a good question. I believe that we may take them back because my guess is that the conceptual design may change, but we'll have them and be ready to place them out if and when we need to again. But they were part of the pre-referendum, trying to get support out for the project.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just asked because maybe they could be used again.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Okay. Budunzi, is your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Okay, okay, I have one invoice from the 18th, and then I have a more current invoice. So one is for 8 and one is for 7.
That's correct.
2 separate invoices.
Is the motion before us on the first invoice, or do we have?
No, the first invoice was approved at the last meeting.
Okay.
This is the second invoice for $500.01.
Okay, and so I'll look at that as well, but I want to know where it was approved for us to make the decision for the 15. I didn't realize until just now, and looking at them separately, I thought there was maybe a revision, but I see that there are 2 separate ones. So that's the information that I'd like to know, please and thank you.
Yeah, I don't know which meeting, but I don't know that you made the last 3 meetings, and I know it took place in one of
There
those.
have been a few that I have missed, but I'm interested in knowing where the committee made a vote to take on this expenditure to highlight the library.
Okay, all right, thank you. I'm going to
Please
call
and
the
thank you.
question. All in favor of the motion to approve the invoice, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. All opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you so much.
I have
Nancy?
one more invoice. This is
Okay.
for TSKP for $6,965. If you recall, we authorized them to move forward with some additional work. I don't remember when we did it, but I do remember this was in response to some of the public's questions about wanting to see additional renderings. So that's where this came from. So it is invoice number 200802-6 in the amount of $6,965.
Great. Is there a motion to approve? Lois, is there a second? Chris, okay. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor? Great. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. All right.
I opposed it, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you.
I just raised my hand. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 5. Our next meeting is scheduled for the 17th of November, and then we move on to December 1st. We'll get into comments from the committee and any comments from the committee.
Yes, please, and thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone else had their hand up as well.
Go ahead, Budunji.
So how do we move forward in terms of you assuming your new role and will no longer be chair of the committee?
There will be a new chair appointed by the mayor.
Okay.
All right. Bob Berman?
I listened to the comments from both Budunzi and Michelle. It's unfortunate they missed some of the meetings where those issues were discussed. They did miss them. I also noticed that Budunzi did not vote for, against, or abstain on one invoice, and on both of them, Michelle just sat silent. You're going to be active members of the committee. You really need to be attending and participating much more.
Excuse me, I haven't attended fewer
Budunzi.
than I have attended.
Hold on, how do we mute? Please. Let him finish with his comment, please.
We had the discussion about leave certification on and off since last spring. And we had a long discussion about it. We had a long discussion about what the additional cost for that would be. And one of the things we discovered, and I think Lois can confirm this, is that basically there's no real additional cost other than the fact we might have to hire a consultant, and that was totally unclear also. So we may not need that. That was the only possible additional cost by going leads. And I think Scott or Tom can confirm the fact that most of the stuff that we're going to be doing anyway is going to meet lead silver certification, because that's kind of built into the building codes, construction codes anymore. So a lot of that is somewhat redundant. Another comment is the fact that now the real work begins. Now we have to get everything in place. We got to get all the approvals we need as quickly as we can. We need to go ahead and get bid offers out there. Downs needs to get the meeting set up for minority contractors as well. And based on what they did in the human services building, I have no doubt that's going to take place in a timely manner. They did it there. They've done it in other projects as well.
Thank you. Chris?
One more thing, Greg.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want everybody in this committee to start thinking about, A, where might the libraries move for temporary swing space, and B, think about handicap access and what's going to be needed for all of that going forward, and the different ways in which we can do things, thinking outside of the box to make this much better for everybody. Those are the things we need to think about as we're going forward and looking at construction and all the rest. So put your thinking caps on, everybody. We have a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
And forgive me if this is a duplicate of a question. How do we inform the town about the referendum being passed? How is that relayed to the community? I've got a few emails today asking if it was passed, and I'm just wondering, how is that relayed to our community? Is there a write-up in our newspaper? Is there?
That's a good question. I know that it will be in a messenger. It's online with the library. Someone asked me if we could put something on the digital display board. I don't know if we will or if we can, but we should think about how to get the word out and disseminate it more broadly.
Yeah, I think
Elizabeth, do
we
you have
should,
anything? Yeah.
I think we should be intentional again about that and keeping the community engaged.
Yes, thank you. Good point. Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to request from Nancy that at the appropriate time, we get a final pre-referendum accounting of what we've spent. Thank you.
Great. And if I could, I'm happy to provide that, Mark. And I just wanted to add that you will be getting those from Nancy Haynes. That's with an N, Haynes, and my title is Purchasing and Risk Manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Lois?
I'd like to build on Bob's point about accessibility. Some weeks ago, I'd mentioned to Greg that I thought we ought to have a field trip walking from the lumber yard and imagining how it would be to push a baby carriage and hold a toddler by one hand from the lumber yard into the library before we finalize things. I think it's wonderfully creative and I think it will be beautiful, but I think we need to figure out where that bridge needs to go so it will be most accessible for people when it's rainy with a baby carriage and a toddler.
Thank you. Any other comments from the committee? Okay. I just wanted to comment that I will be submitting my letter of resignation as chair of the Library Building Committee tomorrow. As some of you may know, I was elected to serve on council and the swearing-in ceremony will take place on Monday. It has been a privilege and honor to serve as chair of this building committee. This is my third library building committee, and I would say that this has been one of the most satisfying and gratifying building committees that I've served on, mainly because it's here in Bloomfield, the town that I love, but secondly, because of all of you. We have a committee of 17 people, and for the most part, we've all been on the same page with the same goals of trying to make sure that we present a library building project that will be in the best interest of our residents, not only today, but into the future. I remind folks all the time that we are in a conceptual design phase. I submitted an article to the Messenger on Friday trying to reiterate that and also to explain the process and where we are. I talk to people all the time about our record. I'm very proud of what we've done to this point. We've accomplished a lot. There's been a lot of due diligence, a lot of hard work. We've had 31 regular committee meetings. They've all been open to the public. We've invited the public's input. We've had 6 special meetings. We had more than 50 subcommittee meetings. We placed 2,000 phone calls to residents. We did a survey and got 1,700 responses from the community. We've had articles in the messengers. We had 2 public forums, 3 council presentations. We met with conservation, energy and environment, design review, economic development, beautification. We met with the library staff. We've met with Seabury. All that to say that we have done, in my opinion, a great job of reaching out to the community and trying to present what we believe is going to be the best library project for our community. I wanted to particularly thank the library staff, the friends of the library building committee members, all of you for your hard work, the library board of trustees, and more importantly, our residents. Their input has been invaluable and we continue to ask for their input. And I know at times I've gotten very defensive about that because I feel that we have invited the public's participation throughout this entire process. And not everyone's goals or needs have been met, but we've listened and we've heard and we've tried to be accommodating and trying to come up with a project that is best going to suit the project and the community. And I particularly want to thank Nancy, who's been terrific from a staff input of supporting this project. And I'll tell everyone that Mark has been tremendous as a vice chair. He's lent his expertise. He's been a great partner, and I just thank him for everything. Leah and Maxine for chairing the subcommittees, our friends from Downs and TSKP and everyone. But most importantly, it's the community. This will be the community's project, and it's been a pleasure serving with you all. And it's with mixed emotions that I have to resign, because I really love this project and I love our town. And I'm so excited about what we are doing. And as a future member of the council, you can be sure that this library project will be very important to me. And I look forward to further conversations and making this happen. So thank you again for all of your time, attention, and support. And thank you, more importantly, for all the time that we put into this project. I think it's been very easy for people to be critical at various points, but not many of them have done and spent the time that many of you have spent on behalf of this, on behalf of the town, but for the library. It's just above and beyond. And I counted up the meetings, and we've got 80, 90 meetings that we've had. And some of you have attended almost all of those in a span of just over, I think we started July, 16 months, 18 months. Incredible, all volunteer work. So thank you all. And again, it's been a pleasure. And we will definitely make sure, I hope that the committee is open to input from the community, because that's important and that's what we've talked about. But I am very, very appreciative of your support, and thank you so much. And Nancy, do we have anything from the community? Any comments from the
Round
public?
of
Yes.
applause for Greg first, please.
Yes, thank you, Greg. We'll
Thank
be
you.
seeing you when we report to you as we move forward. Yes, we do. We have Linda Pagani. Go ahead, Linda. You can
Okay,
unmute
yep,
yourself.
thank you, Nancy. I'm here. Yes, congratulations to everyone on a job well done. I'm just very excited for what these projects will bring to our community and to the BPL system. So it's a happy, happy day. And just thank you all so much for everything you've done. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Next, we have Sten Casperson. Okay, Sten, go ahead, unmute yourself and go ahead and talk.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3 quick things. First of all, congratulations to the committee as a whole for the referendum. Secondly, congratulations to Ava Biffer for re-election to the library trustees. Thirdly, congratulations to Greg Davis for his council position. Looking forward to his participation there as much as he has done on this committee. Second, Washbrook, the floodplain. I have investigated this in detail, including meeting with 2 gentlemen at the Town of Bloomfield Engineering Department regarding intrusion on the floodplain, what happens upstream of the library, what happens downstream of the library as a result of high water. I will just simply endorse what Ritzik was saying, that the understanding I have that they have is with respect to Army Corps of Engineers, if there's not an intrusion which is not offset in the existing floodplain, there shouldn't be a large schedule problem. But you do need to get that officially from somebody with authority. Number 3, how to get the message to the public, to the taxpayers in Bloomfield. Just think about the following. You have 15 posters out. I assume they're still there. Make up some stick-ons, which you can put across the poster that says referendum approved, ! That's all you have to do. That's not all you have to do. That's easy to do, highly visual. If they saw the posters, they'll see, wow, the referendum passed. I didn't know that. It's not going to show up in the current. So just a thought. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So is there anyone else in the public that would like to speak? If you raise your hand, I'll promote you. Don't see anybody else.
Okay, great. With that being said, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Perm. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.